Mohandas Karmchand Gandhi was born October 2nd, 1896, into a British-ruled India. As a youth, he did not stand out amongst his peers. His school record was, on the whole, mediocre. He was married at the age of 13 and thus lost a year of school. However, he concealed a burning passion for self-improvement. In order to keep up the family tradition of holding high office in one of the states in Gujarat, he would have to qualify as a barrister. To accomplish this, he went to a college in England. Many of his moral and social beliefs were shaped while in England. When he returned to India, he had a hard time finding work, so he accepted an offer of a year's contract from an Indian firm in Natal, South Africa. He lived in Africa for 2 decades, returning to India only briefly in 1996 and 97. He suffered much personal racial discrimination while in South Africa. These humiliations were the daily lot of Indian traders and laborers in Natal. What was new was not Gandhi's experience, but his reaction. He would not accept injustice as part of the natural or unnatural order in South Africa. He would defend his dignity as an Indian and as a man. In July 1894, at the age of 25, he started fighting for Indian rights in Africa. Gandhi returned to India in January 1915. For 3 years after returning to India, Gandhi declined joining any political agitation or supporting the British war effort. However, in February 1919, the British pushed through the Rowlatt Acts, which empowered the authorities to imprison without trial those who suspected sedition. A provoke to Gandhi finally revealed a sense of engagement from the British Rajah and announced a Satyagraha, which means holding on to truth, to disengage a determined but non-violent resistance to evil. The results of a political earthquake shook the subcontinent in the spring of 1919. The violent outbreaks that followed, like the massacre of Amritsar, which was the killing led by British soldiers that killed nearly 400 Indians, prompted him to stay in politics. By the autumn of 1920, Gandhi dominated the political aspect of India, commanding an influence never obtained by any political leader in India. He refashioned the 35-year-old Indian National Congress into an effective political tool of Indian nationalism. Gandhi's message rang out loud and clear, quote, "It's not the British guns, but it is but the imperfections of the Indians," end quote. Salt March. The Salt March was one of the major protests that Gandhi did. The march was the first act of his campaign to earn freedom from the British. The salt production and distributing industry had long been a very big profit-making monopoly of the British. Through a series of laws, the Indian populace was prohibited from producing and selling salt independently. Instead, Indians were forced to buy expensive, heavily taxed salt. This affected many Indians who were poor and could not afford such highly priced salt. The salt tax began in the 19th century and was a highly contentious issue throughout the period of British rule. In early 1930, Gandhi decided to start a highly visible demonstration against the salt tax by marching through western India on the coast of the Arabian Sea. He set out on foot March 12th, accompanied by several dozen other followers. After each day's march, they would stop at a different village along the route. Along the route, large crowds would join. After walking 240 miles, they reached their destination of Dandi, India, on the morning of April 5th. Gandhi and his followers picked up handfuls of salt, thus technically producing salt and breaking the law. Gandhi kept encouraging people to break the salt law, and in May, Gandhi was imprisoned. Later that year, over 60,000 more people were arrested. Gandhi was released a year later in January 1931. The Salt March was not the only nonviolent way Gandhi protested. In order to get people's attention and tell them to stop being violent, he fasted for 21 days. A shot heard around the world. On January 31st, 1948, the world awoke to a shocking headline. Gandhi, the spiritual leader in India, was dead. He had been shot the day before by Nathuram Godse at a prayer ceremony in Delhi, India. Nathuram Godse was a Hindu extremist. On the evening of the assassination, Godse went to the grounds of the Birla House in New Delhi, where Gandhi held his daily prayer meetings. He approached Gandhi outside the building, bowed, and shot Gandhi 3 times at point-blank range. Gandhi fell to the ground. His followers rushed to him and called for a doctor, but it was too late. Gandhi was dead at the age of 78. Gandhi's life may have ended, but his legacy will live on forever. In conclusion, Gandhi's refusal to commit violence against the British, despite many of his followers' beliefs during the early 1900s, showed extraordinary ability to compromise. Undoubtedly, his resolve and movement was one of the primary reasons the conflict ended.